You cannot stand on the streets and shout Palestine without being attacked by a pro-Israeli or vice versa. Guys, why is that? Let's start with just before the 20th century. Our story begins way back in time when the region now known as Israel and Palestine was a bustling hub of history. Canaanites, Philistines, Hebrews and more all called this place home. Guys, it was like a historical cocktail party. What could go wrong? We speed to the late 19th century. And a new player arrives on the scene, the Zionist movement. They were all about the idea of a Jewish homeland in Palestine, which was part of the Ottoman Empire at the time. Talk about bold ambitions. But the real game changer was World War I. The Ottoman Empire bit the dust and suddenly Palestine found itself under British rule. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration threw its weight behind a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. That's like giving your neighbors a key to your house. Now comes post-World War II. After the horrors of the Holocaust, Jewish immigration to Palestine skyrocketed. This led to some serious roommate dispute with the local Arab population. Guys, you can imagine it got a bit crowded. The world tries to help at the United Nations with a partition plan of 1947. The so-called Big Bright Idea was a plan to split Palestine into Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem under international administration. The Jews said yes please, but the Arab states and Palestinian Arabs gave it a big no thank you. We move on to the terrible 1948 Arab-Israeli War. In 1948, Israel said, "We're having our own state," and boom, they were off to the races. The Arab neighbors, not so happy about that, decided to give them a bit of a welcome party, serving some nothing but bullets. At the end of the party, Israel emerged from the war with expanded territory. Then came the 1967 Six-Day War. Just when you thought things couldn't get more interesting, Israel decided to occupy the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza Strip, and the Golan Heights after a bit of a tiff with its Arab neighbors. This centuries-old feud, is there an end to it? Unfortunately not. Imagine this, it's October 1973, and on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, the Yom Kippur, Egypt and Syria decided to throw a surprise party with tanks and soldiers. Israel got caught off guard and it turned into a real showdown. It eventually ended with a ceasefire, but not without significant casualties and some land swapping. Now hold on to your hats. I feel like Sam Beckett in the Quantum Leap series. Fast forward a bit and we're into the late 80s. Palestinians in the occupied territories decided they've had enough of the Israeli rule. So, they started a years-long protest called the First Intifada. It involved strikes, protests, and even a few clashes with Israeli forces. Talk about standing up for what you believe in. Then, in '93, the Oslo Accords were signed. It was like a first date between Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO. They agreed to give Palestinians some self-rule in parts of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. It was a step toward peace, but, well, you'll see it wasn't all smooth sailing. The early 2000s brought us the Second Intifada, also known as the Al-Aqsa Intifada. Palestinians weren't happy, and they let it be known. This time it involved more protests and violence, making the peace process seem like a game of musical chairs. In 2005, Israel decided it was time to pack its bags and leave Gaza. It was like a breakup where one side decided to leave unilaterally. But Gaza remained under Israeli blockade, so it wasn't exactly a clean break. And then, there were the Gaza wars. Think of these like a rocky relationship with flare-ups, often triggered by rocket attacks from Palestinian militants. Both sides suffered casualties and damage during these intense periods. Tensions in the West Bank are like a pot that's been simmering for a while. Protests, settlements popping up like mushrooms after rain, and security incidents keep the situation heated. Oh, and don't forget the Jerusalem protests. These usually revolve around issues like access to religious sites and housing disputes. They're like the fireworks on a stormy night. Now here's a twist in the tale. In 2020, a group of countries, including the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco, decided it was time to make nice with Israel. They shook hands, signed some papers, and it was all part of the Abraham Accords. It's a new chapter in the region's history. Is Israel using AI to protect its borders? Absolutely. Israel has been right at the forefront, using advanced artificial intelligence to protect and safeguard its people and borders. They've got AI-powered cameras and systems keeping a watchful eye on their borders and vital infrastructure. It's like having high-tech guardian angels looking out for any suspicious activity. When it comes to cybersecurity, Israel is the place to be. They've got AI in their corner, ready to detect and fend off any cyber threats that come their way. It's like an impenetrable digital fortress. Israel is the king of drone tech. They use AI to make their unmanned aerial vehicles even smarter. These drones are out there, flying high, doing everything from surveillance to targeted strikes when they need to. It's like having eyes in the sky with laser precision. AI is not just crunching numbers, it's predicting security threats before they even happen. This means law enforcement can be proactive, stopping problems before they escalate. It's like having a crystal ball for crime prevention. Terrorist organizations are out there, but Israel is using AI to analyze data, even monitoring social media to track potential threats. It's like staying one step ahead of those who mean harm. When it comes to borders, AI is the gatekeeper. It's watching for any unauthorized crossings, making sure only the right people get through. It's like having a digital bouncer. But, and it's a big but, we need to remember that the use of AI in security and defense is a double-edged sword. Sure, it's powerful, but it also raises some serious questions. Privacy, human rights, and the potential for misuse are all very real concerns. It's like having a powerful tool that we need to use carefully and responsibly. So, while the technology is cutting edge, the discussions around its use are just as crucial. It's like having a shiny sports car. It's amazing, but you've got to be a responsible driver to keep things on track. Alright folks, let's take a little trip back in time, way back to the biblical era. We're talking about the Philistines and the Hebrews, and boy, did they have a history. Most of what we know about these folks and their interactions comes straight out of the good old Bible, particularly the Old Testament. If it's not in there, we might as well be talking about unicorns. Ever heard of Samson, the strong guy with the luscious hair? Well, his story involved some major showdowns with the Philistines. You know, the Delilah bit? Yeah, that was set against the backdrop of Philistine-Hebrew tensions. Then there's the Battle of Ebenezer, documented in the book of 1 Samuel. This was a showdown of epic proportions where the Philistines and Hebrews went head-to-head. And what makes it even juicier? The Ark of the Covenant made an appearance, and it got captured during this epic clash. The story of David and Goliath. I'm sure you've all heard about this one. It's like the Rocky of the ancient world. A young lad named David takes on the Philistine giant Goliath, and it's a classic tale of Hebrew-Philistine conflict. The Philistines weren't just showing up for a friendly chat. At times they decided they wanted a bigger piece of the pie and established dominance over parts of ancient Israel. You can imagine the Hebrews weren't too pleased with that. Enter King Saul, who had his fair share of run-ins with the Philistines during his reign. The biblical texts document those confrontations in all their glory. Now, before you start thinking that this is all carved in stone tablets, let's remember something. These accounts are mainly from the Bible, so they're coming from a particular perspective. We're talking biblical epic here. And here's the cherry on top. While we've got these biblical accounts, we need to remember that history often has more than one narrator. There might be different viewpoints and stories out there. Plus, archaeologists are still digging up the dirt, literally, and unearthing more about these ancient times. So there you have it, a little glimpse into the past. The Philistines and Hebrews weren't just figures in a dusty old book. They were real people with real stories. And who knows what else we'll discover as we keep digging through the sands of time. Back to present day, the conflict between Hamas and Israel began on the 7th of October, 2023. It started with an unprecedented offensive by Hamas against Israel. The attack began in the morning with a barrage of at least 3,000 rockets launched from the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip against Israel. Hamas also launched a sea, air, and ground offensive. Thousands of militants breached the frontier fence separating the Gaza Strip from Israel. The militants attacked Israeli civilians in their homes, on the streets of their communities, and at other locations along a broad swathe of territory bordering Gaza. Dozens of people were taken hostage. This offensive represented a large failure of Israeli intelligence and is likely to have long-lasting repercussions. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared that Israel was at war and that Palestinians would pay a heavy price. The UN have urged Israel to exercise restraint and stay within international law.
If not already done so, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. The general consensus believed that these may be some of the contributing facts to 2023 terrible attacks. The Gaza Strip, a place that's smaller than some people's backyards, but houses a significant population. Gaza is a tiny strip of land, only about 140 square miles, 365 square kilometers. It's a little slice of land that packs a punch in terms of people. Here's where it gets interesting. Gaza has a sizable population of Palestinian refugees and their descendants. These are folks who were displaced during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War and later conflicts. They're kind of like guests who ended up staying for quite a while. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, is like the host, providing services and contributing to the high population density. Gaza has been a bit of a baby boom central. Historically, it's had some of the highest birth rates around, which, as you can guess, contributes to the population explosion. Limited opportunities to relocate. You'd think with such a small space, people would want to spread out a bit. But here's the catch. The Israeli blockade and restrictions on movement have made it incredibly tough for people to leave. It's like being at a party, but not being able to leave the room. Economic and political factors. Now, let's talk about the economic and political stuff. Gaza's had its share of challenges in both these areas. Economic opportunities are limited, and the political scene is pretty unstable. Many residents rely on international aid to meet their basic needs. And when it comes to Israel's involvement in all of this, it's a complex situation. Israeli blockade. Since 2007, Israel has had a tight grip on Gaza. They've imposed a blockade by land, sea, and air. It's all due to security concerns and conflicts with Hamas, the folks who run the show in Gaza. This blockade limits the movement of people and goods, making things even tighter. Security coordination. Israel may have left Gaza in 2005, but they've still got a say in what goes on. They control the borders, airspace, and waters, which means they decide what goes in and out. Israel control. Speaking of who's in charge, it's primarily Israel, the United States, and the European Union label Hamas as a terrorist group. Yet, despite the blockade, they run the show, including the security part. Limited interaction. Some people and goods can move between Gaza and Israel, but it's like trying to navigate a maze with lots of checkpoints and restrictions. This has led to major economic and humanitarian challenges. International aid. To soften the blow of the blockade, international organizations like the United Nations and various NGOs lend a hand. They provide humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. So, in a nutshell, it's a place that's dealing with a mix of historical factors, population growth, and the challenges posed by a complex web of politics and security measures. It's like trying to fit a big jigsaw puzzle into a tiny box. Before we wrap up today's journey through history and technology, there's something very important we need to say. The story we've just explored is filled with complex and emotional chapters, and it's a tale of real people, real lives, and at times, real suffering. We want to be crystal clear. The intention behind sharing this history and discussing the use of AI in security is not to support or condone any form of violence or harm on either side of this ongoing conflict. It's our sincere hope that by understanding this history and the technological developments, we can shed light on the path to peace and better solutions for everyone involved. It's vital that we remember the human face of this story and extend empathy to those affected. Peace, understanding, and dialogue are the keys to resolving conflicts and building a better future for all. No matter where you stand, we believe in promoting peace and unity. The past is written, but the future is ours to shape.